Over the last 4 weeks, we have been entrenched in a collection of talks that revolve around the idea of mental health. And we're taking a look at it through the lens and through the perspective of, hey, are there some biblical principles that inform how we should approach this? Are there some thoughts and Jesus words or Jesus examples that would help us understand what process we should pursue? Does he even care about our mental health and our mental well-being? Does he have anything to say? And with that, we've tried and attempted to create some common language in each one of our gatherings from week 1 now to here in week 4 of the series. And so I want to make sure we continue with that theme and understanding what that sameness or that leveling the playing field, or at least being on the same page with the mental health language at the beginning of our talk this morning. Here it is. Mental health is our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, how we feel, and how we act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make healthy choices. And so that's the idea. That's what we're approaching. We're trying to figure out, hey, Jesus, do you have anything to say about these things, right? And that's what we're asking the question of, is this definition of mental health. And in particular, when we look at mental health, we see that there are obstacles that keep us from that definition being something that's positive. And we identify those from a clinical standpoint as a mental illness, a condition that affects a person's thinking, feeling, behavior, or mood. Now, we don't enjoy the term mental illness, and so we soften that language. We would typically use a mental health struggle, right? Because we feel like we can overcome struggles, whereas an illness seems like a label and something that we would be attached to, maybe even permanently. And so we attempt to just kind of manage what the expectation is in terms of the language that we use. But the reality is no matter what you call it, the truth is still the same in terms of how it affects you, and that's really what we want to chase down. Not necessarily the label, but the step that you ought to take if you could see some of that in you. We see that 1 in 5 U.S. adults experience mental illness each year. 1 in 20 U.S. adults experience serious mental illness each year, which is an enormous number of people. Serious mental illness is defined as one or more mental, behavioral, or emotional disorders resulting in serious functional impairment which substantially interferes with or limits one or more major life activities. Serious mental illness includes major depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, panic disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and borderline personality disorder. Now, with those definitions and that understanding, we've also asked the question each week, what causes it? What causes the things that we wrestle with internally? Where do they begin? What we found is there's no single cause. But there's a number of factors that contribute to the risk for mental illness. Adverse childhood experiences such as trauma or a history of abuse, like child abuse, sexual assault, witnessing violence. Experiences related to ongoing chronic medical conditions. Biological factors or chemical imbalances in the brain. The use of alcohol or drugs. Having feelings of loneliness or isolation are all things that contribute to the risk of mental health struggles or mental illness. But I also want to make sure that you are very aware that I am not a mental health expert. In fact, in all of my schooling that I've gone through, I've taken, I think, 3 that I can think of off the top of my head, 3 pastoral counseling classes between undergrad and my master's. 3. That's like 9 hours of education. That's not a lot, you know? It's not a lot. And for sure, it was just basically what that is having conversations, listening to someone lecture you about it, reading a couple of books, and then taking some tests, which for sure, I want to make sure I have a good grade on. So the actual practical application of that, executing the knowledge, is a completely different thing, right? Now, if you were to ask me to put a list together of the things that I'm incredibly confident to walk you through, A mental health crisis is not one of them. But what we have done is we've created relationships and partnerships with people that have spent now their entire adult lives pursuing the opportunities and abilities to do just that. That they understand the world of mental health like pastors are supposed to understand the Bible. And so what we attempt to do here at Foundation is to create and forge partnerships that leverage a biblical principle catalyst and the tools that are used in mental health awareness and conversations through counselors and therapists. And we blend those two things to approach how do we get to a place of good mental health. And so we ask each week, does Jesus care about our mental health? What does he have to say about it? What is the biblical catalyst principles that are present throughout the Bible? And can we use those principles as a launching point to a next step towards better mental health? So here we are, week 4. I need it, but I don't want it. I want it, but I don't know how to get it. I know how to get it, but I'm nervous or scared or anxious or embarrassed. It's help. Help. Today, our journey is to find a biblical catalyst for getting help. Let's define help. Help is defined as make it easier for someone to do something by offering one services or resources, right? That's it. That's the definition of help. Like, all right, things are going to be easier. We're going to make it easier for someone to do something by offering one services or resources, right? In other words, we've got something in front of us that isn't easy, but if we were to reach out for help, it would make it easier, right? Now, it doesn't make it like a walk in the park. It just makes it that it's not going to be as heavy if I lift the whole thing by myself kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? Like those things you put in the back of your truck, and they for sure told you at Lowe's, don't unload this by yourself, but you're like, oh, it's fine. I mean, goodness gracious, I can do this. And all of a sudden, you got a broke foot and go to the emergency room, your tailgate fell off. Like those kind of things. No one ever has done that before. It's just me? Okay. All right, well, that's fine. It's fine, right? I've never been in the emergency room with a broke foot. Okay. Today. You know, wondering why should we ask for help? So I asked the smartest person I know. Just straight up. I got on my computer and I went to ChatGPT and said, hey, tell me, why should we ask for help? This is what ChatGPT said. Asking for help is an essential aspect of maintaining good mental health. Shut up. Has he been listening to me? I don't know if it's a he. I don't know what this ChatGPT is, but it's scary. Asking for help is an essential aspect of maintaining good mental health. It encourages emotional expression, reduces feelings of isolation, and helps prevent the negative effects of prolonged stress. Thank you, ChatGPT. For those of you who are behind the curve, that's artificial intelligence speaking, right? You know what I'm saying? Some of y'all are just like, oh, okay, I thought you had a friend. You know, these millennials name their kids weird things now. Chat, GPT, I get it. Yeah. But we don't believe that, do we? We don't believe that. If we really thought that that was true, that asking for help is an essential aspect of maintaining good health, good mental health, we don't believe that. We don't. Holistically as a community, we do not believe that. I can confidently say, you don't believe that. Now, we do have a tendency sometimes to change definitions of words, but we haven't gotten to this one yet. The word essential means there's no other way to do it without it. In other words, there's not a detour. There's no way to get there, that it is essential for good mental health is what we read. So we don't believe that because we have convinced ourselves that we can do it ourselves. We can bootstrap this bad boy. We can read something. We're going to figure it out. We don't need to ask for help, right? That's what we convinced ourselves. That the only thing essential is for us to put our nose to the grindstone, you know? We struggle with this. And so I asked some people. I asked some folks that I know have struggled to ask for help. I said, hey, would you be honest with me? Would you share with me why it took you so long or why you were so hesitant? This is what they said. The first thing was, it was about past experience. They had asked for help previously and it didn't go well. And so they were like, I'm not doing that again. Not going to do that again. For some, it was the stigma that comes with it. In particular, two of the guys I talked to said, I don't want other people to think I'm weak. People will know I don't have my life together. You know, we have this curated life that we create for ourselves, right? And we post it online most of the time. And so we've got this thing that we've got to keep up with. And so we can't really pull back the curtain and let people know that, man, I'm having some trouble, having some struggle, because that doesn't go with the curated self. It's a struggle. Others said, I didn't want to burden somebody else with my own issue. Like, it's my issue. Why ruin somebody else's day, you know? And then there was a couple that said, I didn't think I needed help. I didn't think anything was wrong. You know how much it sucks to be the only person in your life that knows you need, or that doesn't think you need help? That everyone else around you knows you need it, except you. And the sucky part about it is not that reality, it's the reality that's inferred with it, is that the reason you don't know is because they're so scared to tell you. Like, they're terrified that if they were to let you know, you should probably talk to somebody, that the way you treat other people isn't all that normal or healthy, or the way you approach the world isn't all that great. But they're scared to tell you. You're the only one that doesn't know. So I want to look at a biblical story, a story from the life of Jesus that I think we can gain some insight from. It's told in the book of Mark. It says this: Then they came to Jericho. As Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. Undoubtedly, the situation that he's in is that his blindness has put him in a place where he's going to spend significant time every day begging. It's one of two scenarios. Either he's a part of a family that has placed him in this place where, you know, they've got to provide for his needs, because in a first century world, there's not nonprofits or organizations that are advocates for folks that can't see and can't function in the way that at least the society in the first century was set up. And so they were just simply outcasts. Nobody made opportunities for them or kind of modified things for a blind person. That just wasn't it, right? If they couldn't get in with the rest of society, it's just go beg, right? And so a family would drop them off in a public place early in the morning, and they would beg, and they maybe have a cup, or they'd have like a little box or something out like that, and they would beg. Well, we've seen it, right? We've seen it. In fact, I think my favorite sign I saw just a couple of weeks ago, I was in New York City, and I was walking down the street, and I saw a man who had a cardboard sign and says, I don't want food, I just need money for weed. And that's what he said. And he had a little box sitting there, and I was like, wow, at least he's honest, I guess. You know, at least he's shooting straight with everybody who walks by, right? Like, that's the situation this guy was in, is he's like like shaking a cup, or he's got a box, or I don't know if he's got a sign, I'm not sure, but he's begging. That's what we know. And his blindness is caused to begging. The second situation is that he doesn't have a family, and this is just pretty much where he stays. He's probably got a 1 or 2 block radius that he's very familiar with, and this is kind of where he lives. He gets under shelter when it's raining, and he comes out and he sits and he begs until he has enough, and then likely he's got some trusted people that he gives the money to, or he can make it to the market to where he can get enough food to just survive, and that's where he's at, right? And that's where this guy is, and all of a sudden this crowd is going by, and he hears that it's Jesus, and he begins to shout out his name. He says, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Now, the Son of David is not so much a name as we would think it is. It's more of a title, more like a messianic title. When we use the word Son of David, what we're beginning to get some insight into is this is a very deeply Jewish man that's shouting Jesus' name. In fact, he ties Jesus to this idea of David or Son of David because David was one of the greatest kings in the history of the people of God, the Jewish people. And for sure, when you think through what David accomplished and David did, they had been waiting for someone to pick up where David left off. And all of a sudden, these rumor mills had started, and this Jesus of Nazareth was through the lineage of David. Now, there was generations from David to Jesus. Same line and same lineage. They're related, right? Like, they're for sure related. But what happened was, because they thought Jesus was so special, they just moved him up the genealogy and said, you're going to pick up right where David left off, which is the people of God, the Jewish people, dominant, right? Like, we are dominant. At this particular period in time, the Jewish state or the nation, the land of the Jewish people were occupied by the Roman Empire. And so everybody was waiting for David to get back. They were like, look, when the Messiah comes, Messiah means Savior. When the Savior comes, he's not coming to save us from a sin problem. He's coming to save us from a geographical boundary problem. And he's going to tell the Roman soldiers, you think Spartan's awesome? Like, I'm about to kick you out of here, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's what they were thinking. And so when all of a sudden this big, huge, enormous, like fever pitch is happening for the Son of David, it's like, man, liberation is coming. In fact, in just a little while after this, there's a huge parade where Jesus is coming into Jerusalem, and they are shouting at the top of their lungs, King, Hosanna. Like, they are looking at him as, you are the guy that's about to fix all our Roman problems. And so that's what he's shouting out, just what he had heard the crowd say. He doesn't know Jesus. He knows of Jesus. I wonder what it's like to hear the voice of Jesus. Not even just as a blind man, but just in general. I mean, certainly as a blind man, the sense of hearing is probably a different level than what we would experience typically. But I wonder what that voice sounded like. Like, was it just Morgan Freeman, you know, in a Middle Eastern Jew's body walking down the street, you know, like this Middle Eastern Jewish carpenter that just, when he opens his mouth, Emperor, the penguins come out, you know what I'm talking about? Probably watched Bruce Almighty many times. I don't know what his voice sounded like. But can you imagine being the blind man and hearing his entourage start to come by and hearing that voice, the voice that belongs to the Son of God? It's so much simpler in those days, wasn't it? I mean, once you had been to an event where Jesus was teaching, then you knew his voice. It was easy. And so fast forward, anytime you needed to know the difference between a voice of the world and a voice of Jesus, you knew which voice it was. You could hear a governor speak and listen and say, you know what, that's different than what I heard Jesus speak, and I can trust him more than I can trust anyone. And it's easy to make that differentiation because you know what the voice of Jesus sounds like. And even if someone were to stand up and say, well, I speak on behalf of Jesus, like, no, Jesus talks all the time. Like, he doesn't need anyone to speak on his behalf right now, right? Like, that's the next act, right? The whole, like, the disciples go out and plant churches, the whole thing. That's coming, but right now, he's just doing all the talking. We're doing all the listening. We don't know enough to talk at the moment, you know? But today, it's so difficult, isn't it? I mean, we just sometimes sit in our world completely blind, and we hear crowds going by, and because it's a loud noise, we just think, oh, I bet that's important. Probably should listen in. Let me invite them to have some influence. Like, hey, big loud crowd, will you come to my place of need? I get this question asked to me a lot, like, hey, from a pastor's perspective, like, how do I know what God is telling me? How do I know to listen to God? Like, how do I differentiate between the two? And so I tell people, there's three things. There's three pieces to putting together that puzzle. Step one is you need to start having some conversations with a spiritual big brother or big sister or spiritual father, spiritual mother, someone who's further along than you in the spiritual journey. And you need to start having some conversations and sharing what you're struggling with, sharing the conversation or the decision that you're having to make. Right? And say, hey, this is where I'm at. And I'm just looking for insight, right? I'm just looking from someone who's further along than me in their walk with Jesus. I just want to hear what you have to say and what you think about it. How would you process this if you were in my shoes, right? You need to have some of those conversations. The second thing that you need to do, in addition to the conversations, is you need to open your Bible and you need to read the words of Jesus. And the easiest place to do this is in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. It's like an intro to Jesus, a Jesus 101. He gives some incredible biblical principles that are translatable to any culture, any language, any season of life, any of them. And when you begin to read those principles that are housed in just those three chapters of the Bible, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, if you just read that and you just start saying, hey, I'm going to read this every day, I'm just going to learn this is what Jesus wants out of our world as a whole and individually, right? And so you just begin reading that, right? And you're listening. You're like, man, how am I living out these principles? Am I missing one of these? Am I falling short in this area? Is this one a challenge to me? Is this one super easy? Is this my strength? That's what you're asking. Third step is you need to figure out how to do some listening prayer. And so when I tell people this is what it looks like, you need to get you a book, like a notebook, and you need to spend some time, chunks of time. I would start with 10, maybe 15, maybe 20 minutes where you're going to pray, but you're not going to pray the way you've been taught to pray, which is we're going to tell God the things that we're thinking, right? We're going to say, thank you. We're going to say, your God is great. God is good. We're going to say, please forgive me of my sins. Lead us not into temptation. Like all of those things we've been taught, we say this to God, but we're going to spend some time simply listening. And we're going to write down all of the thoughts that come into our head. Now, you might say, well, how do I know the difference between a Jesus thought and just some rando thought that just snuck in when I wasn't looking? No, you write them all down. You might not know the difference. In fact, the first 100 times you do this, you will have an enormous difficulty differentiating between the two. But this is the magic. This is the magic. So you take your listening prayer and what you begin to write down, and then you begin to compare that with the principles Jesus has already said and the conversations you continue to have with your spiritual mentors, big brothers, big sisters, fathers, and mothers of the faith. And when all three of those things begin to say the same thing, you can have incredible confidence walking forward. This is what God wants you to do. The problem is, most people, when they come and ask me, I'll tell them, and they say, well, I've got to make a decision on Monday, And it's like, okay, well, that's in like tomorrow, You know what I'm saying? So they're like, well, how do I fit this in? You don't. No, I mean, following Jesus is a nonstop thing. If you're a fully devoted follower of Jesus, then you're going to be having these conversations with people who are further along with you spiritually on a regular basis. This is just going to become a part of who you are. Reading the words of Jesus is going to be something that you normally do. Listening in prayer is going to be something that is a habit to you, right? This is going to be an ongoing thing. And so for you to come and say, well, I got a big decision to make on Monday, they're going to expect an answer. I need to know today. My advice is going to be, do the best you can. Because this is the other promise that is made. Even if you make the wrong decision, if you will allow that decision to be leveraged towards the kingdom, the promise is that he makes all things work for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. Even if your decision was off purpose, off plane, off path, and it leads you down a path that you were never supposed to be, even in those moments, and I'm saying that this word and that promise is good for even if you are turning yourself in at the jail tomorrow morning. You've made a bad decision. And thankfully, maybe the sheriff has given you time and expects you to honor it, and you're going to be there tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock or whatever time they told you. Even the decision that led to you to that reality, even those decisions God could leverage for good if you will turn them over to him. So from there all the way to my boss needs to know if I want to take the promotion or if I want to stay here. I don't know if you're going to get an answer. You can ask God. He might send you an owl from Hogwarts. I don't know. I'm not sure. He could do that. I don't think so, but he could. But the chances are you're just going to have to make a decision based upon where you're at right now, and it might be the wrong decision. But then you got to walk into that decision knowing, hey, no matter what here, I'm going to give it to God. If I get all the way in this and this opportunity actually wasn't an opportunity and it was just a bad deal waiting to happen, then I got to be man enough to say, I made a mistake. I took the wrong path. And I'm going to give this rebuilding process to Jesus. Bartimaeus, though, he has the luxury of somehow he knows the voice of Jesus. And so he hears them going by. And so he shouts, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And then this happens. Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet. But he shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. In other words, he's sitting there shouting and screaming and yelling. And all of a sudden people are like, Bartimaeus, shut up. Like we're not trying to draw attention to our homeless problem. We're not trying to draw attention to the beggars, the people who are in need problem. We're not trying to do that, okay? We're not trying to do that thing. We're trying to do what I think San Francisco did this past week, where like I had a bunch of leaders come in there and they just moved all the homeless people away, right? They bust them out and they're like, we ain't got no homeless people. And everybody came and now they're all back, right? That's what we're trying to do. Just all you people who are problems, just shut up, stop talking while the rabbi's going by. Let's just pretend we ain't got none of these issues, okay? Shut your mouth, right? That's what we're trying to tell him. And he's like, no. You're not going to shut me out. I only get one chance to be close to the Son of David. Remember that whole Messiah, Savior, that kind of thing? No. I'm a problem yesterday. I'm going to be a problem tomorrow, but for sure, I'm going to shoot my shot today, right? That's what he's saying. But what they were telling him is, you shout all day. Jesus ain't got time to stop and deal with you. He's got more important things to do. We would rather hide your issues than bring light to your issues. Or you heard, Jesus doesn't care about you. Jesus doesn't care about you. Or he heard, you don't actually deserve his help. I mean, of all the people Jesus could help, Bartimaeus, you think you are on the list? Or maybe you're on the list, but you're down on the list. You know what I'm saying? Like the list is big. It's a big list. And you're at the bottom of the list. Or he just heard, shut up, nobody cares. Nobody cares. Or we heard, how dare you ask for help? You sit here and beg every day, and then you're gonna beg for help when this rabbi is walking through? Like, kidding me? Jesus stopped and said, call him. So they called to the blind man. Cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you. Which, isn't that just as hypocritical as it is? Like, shut your mouth. And Jesus is like, hey, tell him to come over here. Good luck. This is your day. I guess okay, right? Like, all of a sudden, they're happy for him. You know what I'm saying? Like, cheer up. He's calling you. When they, just like 10 seconds before, they're like, shut your mouth, boy, you know? He's calling you. Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet And he came to Jesus. What would that be like to have Jesus call you? What would that be like? What would it be like for Jesus to say to you, hey, come to me. Come to me. He said, I know your issues. I can hear your desperation. Come to me. What would you do if Jesus called you? Would you get up? Or would you in your head say, well, I mean, goodness, I'm the blind one. Why don't you come to me? You know? Is that what we would do with the opportunity? What if Jesus is calling you this morning? What if he's saying, enough? You've been begging on the side of the road. But today I'm calling you to do something differently. Would you get up? I tell you, when we think through spiritual movement here at Foundation, we try and think through the idea of eliminating as many barriers to beginning that process as possible. And so today, if like internally you're thinking, man, I do feel like maybe Jesus is calling me to get up and do something. We want to give you a simple step to begin that process. You can just text the word begin to the number on the screen, and our staff is monitoring that. We will have no idea who you are. You can do it anonymously, and you can just text and begin a conversation today about, hey, what would it look like if I said yes to Jesus? And if you want that conversation to graduate to an in-person conversation today, that's up to you. It's on you. You can let us know, yeah, I'd like to actually talk to one of the pastors today. Or if you want to set up lunch or coffee this week, then that's up to you. We can do that. Like, that's a doable thing for us to maybe help answer some questions that sit with you or help you figure out, hey, what does it look like for me to give my life to Jesus? And we've got the phone number up there now, but even if you forget it and you're like, you know what, I should have remembered that phone number, just Google it. It's the number that's listed on the internet for our church. You can text it anytime, 24 hours a day, right? We might not get back to you depending on what's what, but you can text it whenever you want to. And the next time we wake up and we look at it, someone will respond to you and say, hey, yeah, let's begin the conversation. I think it would have been silly for Bartimaeus to be that close to Jesus and have Jesus call him and him sit there and do nothing. So don't do that. He gets over to Jesus, and Jesus looks at him, and this is breathtaking to me. It's just one of those things like, man, I wish I thought like Jesus, because for sure what's about to happen is not what I would have done at all had I been Jesus, right? At all. He gets to Jesus, and this is the thing that just blows my mind. He gets to Jesus, and Jesus looks at him and says, what do you want me to do for you? And I'm like, Jesus, he's blind. He's blind, Jesus. He's begging on the side of the road. What do you think he wants you to do for him? He wants you to make it to where he's not blind. You know what I'm saying? Like, I thought you knew everything, this whole Son of God thing, but it is not doing well for you right now. I mean, come on. Read the room. Everyone here knows what he wants you to do for him. I think it's a brilliant question, though. Because the truth is, what if he turns this Jesus, son of David, and all of a sudden becomes this patriot and says, you know what? I don't have to see, but get rid of the Romans. What Jesus said. I think it's a brilliant question on Jesus' end. He says, hey, what do you want me to do for you? The blind man said, Rabbi or teacher, I want to see. I want to see. Go, said Jesus. Your faith has healed you. Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. Jesus asks him such a great question, and he honestly could have done what we often do when someone offers to help us. We'll say something like, it's nothing. It's fine, right? It's nothing. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'm fine. I'm fine, really. Really, I'm fine. I got this. Or I'll figure it out. This is my thing. It's my problem. It's not yours. I got it. Right? I'll let you. If it becomes overwhelming for me, I'll let you know. Right? I will reach out. I promise. Promise. You'll be my first call. Right? I'll let you know. There's a huge difference in the response when we're the people that initiate the ask for help. Because if you notice, those responses I just kind of walked us through that we typically do, those responses come to us when someone else initiates the help. Like when someone sees that we're struggling and they show up and they're like, hey, is everything okay? That's when we respond that way. Like they're trying to lean in a little bit and say, hey, is there any way I can help? And our response to them initiating it is saying, it's fine, it's no big deal, whatever, because we're not emotionally or mentally prepared to answer that question, and we probably didn't see it coming, or maybe we thought they would ask, maybe hoped they would ask, but the truth is we hadn't got any further than, I hope they ask, right? And once they do ask, you're like, I actually don't know what to say. Like, can I tell you the whole thing? What will you do with the whole thing? All those things start spinning in our brain, and then out comes, it's fine, I got it, it's my thing, no problem, I'll let you know, right? But here's the thing. What we need to have is the courage for us to be the initiator. Because if we were to look at our friends and say, hey, I need help. I actually do need help. If we're the ones that initiate and they're like, okay, what's going on? Then we already know we're going to have the conversation. If we know that we're going to ask for help, we can begin to process what language are we going to use when they say help with what? And so it gives us the night to think, or it gives us some time to think. But that's the key. That's the magic. That's the incredible moment to say, you know what? I need help. A lot of you need to ask for help. Now, I'm not saying that as a community, we should stop asking people, can we help? You should continue to do that. Right? We shouldn't just allow this reality that they're more likely to accept help if they ask for it to keep us from being people who invest and move into people's hurt. We shouldn't use it as an excuse. We should continue to do it. It's just the reality that once someone decides, I want help, and then they ask for help, they are much more likely to receive it. Did you notice in the transaction that took place with Jesus and Bartimaeus, how much faith was an enormous part of that transformation? It's just where it started. Like there was some, it says, your faith has healed you. It was his faith that caused him to want to ask for help. Which is why I think it's really important that if you're trying to walk through, hey, what are my struggles? Let's begin. Let the catalyst be a relationship with Jesus. Because that sometimes will give you the courage and the supernatural, unexplainable strength to reach out and say, hey, I don't have all of it together. How do you have that kind of faith? You have to know that kind of Jesus. So how do you know? How do you know if you need help? What should I say if I need help? Where do I start? Well, I knew as we wrapped up our series together that I didn't want to just end on a theological note with a story from the life of Jesus. I knew I wanted to take it from us having a spiritual conversation into a very practical and spiritual conversation. And so I reached out to one of my best friends. He was my roommate in undergrad, and he has gone on to pursue an entire life that's devoted to therapy and counseling. And in particular, he specializes with folks that are really severely struggling. And so he and I were having conversations, and I was like, look, obviously this is not, what I ended up pursuing in terms of my education. And so I'm searching. I know how I want to end our series, but I still haven't found the right tool to use because I want to make it practical. And so we started having a conversation about this tool, and I started to do some research, and we've had continued conversations about it. And so that's how I want to close our time together, by using this tool and allowing you to kind of walk through it, okay? And so this particular tool is called the Adverse Childhood Experiences kind of thought process evaluation. It's 10 questions. And what I want you to do is I simply want you to keep track of how many times you say yes, right? So you're going to keep track of how many times you say yes, okay? Now, this isn't exhaustive. This is just a tool for you to get thinking, right? And so you might be in a place where you're like, you know what? I do feel like there's something just off with the way I see the world or the way that I interact with the world. Or I don't know why I'm so short with people, and it's only some people, it's not everybody, but in this situation, I just for some reason don't process the way I ought to, right? Or maybe there's something else. It's like I can't put my finger on it. I don't know why it is this way. Or maybe you've had someone that loves you tell you like, hey, why is this always get under your skin? Why is this always there, right? And you don't know why. You're not sure. You're like, I have no idea. So this might not have anything to do with it, but it might, right? And so it's a fairly universal tool that's used all over the place. And at minimum, this is going to give you an opportunity to say, hey, if I don't know what I should talk about with a counselor in a conversation, whatever your yeses are here, this is a good place to start, right? If you're like, I don't even know where I'd start here, right? So I'm going to read you 10 questions, and you just count your yeses, okay? Now, all of these are going to be with the heading and in the mindset of before the age of 18. Got it? Before the age of 18. Here we go. Before the age of 18, did you feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, or had no one to protect or take care of you? Before the age of 18, did you lose a parent through divorce, abandonment, death, or other reason? 3, did you live with anyone who was depressed, mentally ill, or attempted suicide? 4, did you live with anyone who had a problem with drinking or using drugs, including prescription drugs, before the age of 18? Before the age of 18, did your parents or adults in your home ever hit, punch, beat, or threaten to harm each other? Before the age of 18, did you live with anyone who went to jail or prison? Before the age of 18, did a parent or adult in your home ever swear at you, insult you, or put you down? Before the age of 18, did a parent or adult in your home ever hit, beat, kick, or physically hurt you in any way? Before the age of 18, did you feel that no one in your family loved you, or thought you were special? Before the age of 18, did you experience unwanted sexual contact, such as fondling or oral, anal, vaginal intercourse, or penetration? So when we look at the language we've been using every week that said, hey, what are the risk factors for mental health struggles or mental illness? The very first one I've been reading every week is the list that we just walked through. Adverse childhood experiences. And so if you were walking through this tool, they would say, hey, if you answered yes to 4 or more, then there's a pretty high likelihood that you should be having a conversation with someone. Now, you might say, well, no, I said yes to a bunch of those and I feel perfectly fine. I feel like I'm in a great place. And for you, that means you've got a lot of resilience, and that's incredible. But all this does is it gives you a tool that if all of a sudden things do go a little sideways and you can't quite figure out what, this gives you a place to start to have a conversation. And now you might have only said, hey, I only said yes to one of those, but one of those was so traumatic. It's like it takes the place of 9. That's for sure a real thing, right? And so the idea is that we would normalize having conversations about the things that have been very difficult for us in our life. That we would find a way forward to leverage the Holy Spirit-filled followers of Jesus that have devoted their lives to mental health. Because the truth is, Jesus does have the ability to snap his fingers and just make things disappear. But since we have moved into a new way in terms of the way God interacts with our world, Jesus no longer is walking around giving us his voice to think through and to leverage. Instead, we've moved into a different interaction where Jesus or the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Now the Spirit of God dwells within us. And so 99% of the time in our world, the way that God accomplishes his desires and mission is through Holy Spirit-filled believers. Because that's the space and the time and the place of the story of God we are in. We're not in the place where Jesus walks around and does those things. The Spirit of God living inside of us, the very resurrection power of Jesus living inside followers of Jesus, is a different way for God to interact with us. And so we should take a chance. We should ask for help and seek out a follower of Jesus that would help us with tools that they have equipped themselves with and would leverage on our behalf for our good. And so today we've tried to make it even easier for you to begin that process. So outside you saw there's 4 tents that are set up. Each one of those tents are an organization in our community that are dedicated to mental health. And they have representatives that are here with us today on campus. It's not our volunteers that are standing out there manning their booths. It's them. They're representatives from the organizations. And so we brought them on campus this morning to say, hey, we want to try and eliminate all the barriers and obstacles, as many as we possibly can. And so my ask this morning is for every single one of you to go to at least one tent. Now, for those of you who are like, yeah, I don't have this, like I'm actually doing great, Clint, so let's not, I don't need none of that stuff, right? That's fine. That's fine. Good for you. That's great. But what we want to do when we walk out of here is we want to put ourselves in the crew of people that are 1 in 5 that are struggling right now. And so let's just put ourselves in their shoes in that 1 in 5 that we've referenced every week who's struggling with mental illness or has mental health struggles, that 1 in 5, do you think that they want to make a beeline as soon as they get out of here and tell every one of you that they've got some things they're struggling with? You think that, why not let's just give them a sign. Everyone who's struggling, we're just going to put a sign around your neck, and then you can just go over there, and everybody else is just going to be like, I wonder what their issue is. That's good. That's good, yeah. Let's just add to stigma. That's exactly what we want to do. And that's not what we want to do. No, we want to eliminate any of that. And so every single one of you go. And it puts all of you in the same boat. No exceptions. And if you get out there like, I don't have time, just go over there and take a card. How much time does it take? You know? And I promise, they all knew this is the way it was going to work. So if they run out of cards, that's their problem. And you might even justify, like, I don't want to take someone else's card. That's not your problem. That's their problem, right? And some of them are just like right here, so they can sprint back and they can go get some more cards. You know what I'm saying? Like they can figure it out. They'll start writing it on a piece of paper. So go take the cards. Go take the candy. Have a conversation. Because the truth is, you might not even need it, but you're going to serve the individuals in this room by making it easier for them who do need it to go to the tent. But you're also going to pick up something, because if you actually do have friends, 1 in 5 of them are struggling. And you know what? They might reach out to you because you're a half-decent person. And then you know what you're going to have? A resource to say, you know what? I don't know a lot about it, but the church that I go to trusts them. So I trust them. Here, you want to call them together? In fact, this is the way it ought to work. For those of you who are struggling and you're like, I've never been to see a counselor before, here's the second thing we want to make sure we do. If any of you want to go see a counselor, and it's like, I've never done it, whatever, I've done it before, it didn't work, I want to try it again, whatever it is. If finances are the issue, we'll take care of that. Your first visit, if you let us know, hey, this is what we want to do, we'll set it up with them, and they'll just send the first visit bill to us. And that's to any of you. Any of you are welcome to do it. Right? Because you might be thinking, well, it's Christmas, so I can't invest that in me. I got kids. Well, then let your church invest it in you. Because a better you is so much better for your kids. So let us help. So when you walk out of here, you go to the tent, you take the card, and you go to your car, you shut the door, and you call the number on the card, and you leave a message. Right? And you just say, hey, so-and-so, it's a foundation, I got your card. And I'm calling today, I know you're closed, but here's my number, call me back, because I know if I waited till Monday, I wouldn't have called. That's it. And if they don't have a way to leave a message, man, y'all get a way to leave a message. You got like 20 minutes to fix this. You know what I'm saying? Like, leave a message. Here's the result of asking for help. Bartimaeus takes a chance, yells for Jesus. Jesus calls him over. Bartimaeus stands in front of Jesus, and Jesus says, how can I help you? And he says, I want to see. And Jesus says, okay. And then it ends with this. He received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. In other words, because he asked for help, he was able to do something he had never done before. Walk freely and follow someone on the road. He never got to do that before. He was always just like, where are we going? Where are we going? Where are we going, right? But no, he's now walking down a road that he's probably been on 1,000,000 times, but he's never seen it, and he's never followed someone. But who's he following? Not just some rando guy. He's following Jesus. Man, what a turn of events. From beggar in the morning to following Jesus in the evening, like that's special. But here's the second thing. Let me tell you something even beyond that. His name is Bartimaeus. You now know his name. You know whose names we don't know? The people telling him to shut up. He doesn't have time for you. The people telling him, hush, we don't want him to see that we've got problems here. The people telling him he doesn't want to hear about your issues. We don't know their names. We don't know who they are. They're just a bunch of people yapping their mouth. You know whose name we know? The blind beggar who had enough courage to ask for help. You know how many people Jesus healed and helped? Nobody knows. Hundreds. You know how many people that he helped, we actually know their name? Very few. Because so often he would help them and they would run off. He would help them and they'd go away. Bartimaeus, Jesus helps him. And you know what he says? The best thing I can do is to follow him. Church, it doesn't get any better than that. So ask for help.